Welcome everyone to Detection and Response in Action, Behavioural Analytics and the Pyramid of Pain. My name's Steve Marshall, I'm UK Group CISO at Bytes, and the plan today is to talk to you about why behavioural analytics is important and how you can reduce the pain of common causes of security incidents and breaches. So without further ado, let me introduce my very special guests that are with me today. Chris Cheney, he's the Security HQ SOC Director, an absolute legend in his field, and is absolutely the man that you need to talk to if you want to discuss the merits of cotton socks. Ferris Tapuni, CEO of Security HQ. If you want to discuss the merits of silk socks, Ferris is your man as he brings a level of class way above Chris. And then Dio, last but by no means least. Dio's the SOC manager of Security HQ. He's actually the man that does all the work so that we don't have to. So let me hand you over to the team and they can tell you about behavioural analytics and why the common causes of pain exist and how you can mitigate those.
Well, thanks, Steve. My name's Chris Cheen. I'm the SOC Director and CTO here of Security HQ, and you can see I'm in the London SOC right now. And I've got my colleagues on the line as well from Dubai and from Pune. Hey, Fraz.
Thanks, Chris. Real pleasure to speak to everybody. My name is Feroz Tapuni, and I'm the CEO of Security HQ.
Hey, this is Tio. Welcome to the Pune SOC, and I'm sitting right here in the Pune SOC. You can see the beautiful SOC here, just behind me.
Okay, this is a good place to start, which is a recent poll that we did on LinkedIn, where we went out and asked the industry, what do they feel is the the emerging threats or the current problems that are keeping them up at night. So ranging from things like third-party insider threat or nation states, rank them 1 to 3 in terms of what things really are a burning problem right now. And I think what is interesting is what came back was clearly insider threat is a problem. 55% of the respondents said that was an issue that keeps them up at night. But interestingly, third parties was one of the threats which was up there as 23%, which was higher than nation state actors, which when you think about it is a little bit surprising because obviously the security vendors out there push a lot around the nation state actor threats, and obviously they are a big problem. But I guess if you are a local authority with 60 third parties plugging into your environment, or even a small entity sitting on a third party hosted environment, then that may be something that keeps you up at night. Guys, what is your view on that?
I reckon it should have been the third parties initially. That's what I think that should have been the first one.
Why do you say that, Dio?
It's mainly because it's the worst managed part in any organization which we have seen, and that's the least of the worries which most of the security industries they just hide it.
And I guess the third party plumbing into your environment over a VPN connection, you don't necessarily have control on that end user and his security controls. You just inherit it.
Definitely, and there is no controls around it. Who goes in, who goes out. So that control is the worst maintained control, and that I think should have been on the high side.
What about nation state actor groups, Fraz? If I can throw that over to you, because you see a lot in the Middle East, particularly Iranian threat.
We do, Chris. We do see a lot of nation state out here in this part of the world. I don't think it's unique, though, to this part of the world. Nation state actors is quite a unique sort of footprint. What they're trying to do in most cases is actually just gathering large amounts of data exfiltration. That's really what they're about. But they don't really care whether it is a small council, a hospital, a school, or a huge telco or a giant water treatment plant. It makes no difference to them. They want to know your data, they want to know your footprint, and they want to know whether they can actually exploit that or collect the data and work out how to deliver a payload. But it's not just unique here, we see it everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. We've seen that. It doesn't matter whether you're a retailer, a local authority, or a bank. You often it's about whether you are low-hanging fruit, whether you have critical data, and they're not fussy about whose data they take. All right. And then the final piece, I guess, is around the insider threat. That's kind of accepted at this point in time that your users are one of your biggest risks, either intentional or unintentional consequences of a data breach, or even an insider that unknowingly compromises data. That is a problem. So I'm not that surprised that it figures in 55% of the vote. Something that we need to address, definitely. So this next slide brings us on to talking about what is a data breach going to cost you? What's the cost of a data breach? And I think the first thing to say is beware of anyone presenting stats on the cost of a data breach. But I can see here that IBM is suggesting that the average cost of a data breach is about $3.86 million in the US at least. And the average time to identify, detect, and respond to a breach when they look at those incidents is 280 days, which sounds like a huge amount of time. Wouldn't you say, Faraz?
No, that seems like an extraordinary amount of time. 280 days is, we've got to be talking about minutes and seconds here. Days is just not acceptable.
Definitely, every second counts here, and as the time passes away, there's extra risk of every single data going out there. It's like humongous. So that's time is the key here.
I mean, from my perspective, we should be talking about detection and response in minutes and hours, not even days ever. So this next slide shows some interesting data that's actually from the Verizon Data Breach Report that's issued every year. And I think the interesting trend that we wanted to pick up on here is the increasing amount of data breaches that are attributed back to errors, because it's one of those things that's commonly overlooked. We all focus very much on things like phishing attacks and malware and other insider abuse of systems, but equally important is to take a look at the things that we can actually directly control, which are things like misconfigurations and errors. So on the left-hand side, on the orange, you can see the upward increasing trend in the proportion of threats attributed to error. And on the right-hand side, you can actually see the breakdown in what they can be pointed back down to. And you can see that misconfigurations is one of the things that's a rising star here. And I think there's a few things that you can point this back to. There's been a lot of IT shift and migrations to cloud, new systems that have been stood up in response to the current COVID pandemic. And I'm assuming that some of those things can be related back to misconfigurations, but it is certainly something that we see. And Dio, I'm going to throw this over to you in a second, but I think that we must see almost on a daily basis major incidents and minor incidents related to misconfigurations that are related to maybe published services that shouldn't be, configurations of firewalls that are unintended, all sorts of things. What's your view on that, Dio?
Absolutely, Chris. I completely agree with this graph. If you put out the real world experience from the SOC, I would say at least 50% of the tickets which we have been raising, which lead to a major breach, is something which always starts with a misconfiguration or error. So that's, I would say, very, very, very real, really close to the real world SOC, I would say.
Okay, Faraz, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think just to follow on what Dio just said there, he's absolutely right. It's something we deal with day to day. But one of the advantages that you do get when you have an MDR service is that kind of visibility, because you're seeing all the logs being reported, the misconfiguration. You'll get a way better understanding of it. But it's a very large part of the work we do with our clients is making sure we button that down.
I think this part of it is actually a good news story, because there is absolutely nothing you can do about a guy sat in an apartment block in Russia or the Ukraine launching phishing attacks at you. That is out of your control. But what you can control is errors and misconfigurations. You can cast an eye on it. You can look at the logs, as Faraz is saying. You can identify when things have gone wrong and respond to it, or be proactive about killing those issues before they become an actual problem. So we're going to focus the next part of the slide on how managed detection and response works, and then going back to that concept around errors as a theme for reported breaches. This slide here is really looking at an overview in terms of how a managed detection and response service really works. And from point number one, we can see the data collection part of that. That's really about us being able to interoperate with any of the customer systems that are out there, whether they are in the cloud, on-premise, new systems, legacy systems. We don't care. What we care about is can we collect those logs, normalize them, and pass them, and then put them through the rest of the processing. And that may require API integrations or standard syslog or Windows event collection, whatever the case may be. We use IBM QRadar, and one of the reasons why we use that is because it's pretty much about the most extensible SIM platform out there in terms of the interoperability with third-party systems. We pretty much never have a problem with collecting anything that's out there that might be a little bit out off the wall or tropical, as well as your standard systems as well. So that's great. The point is that once we've got that data on the collectors that are either in your premises or in the cloud, wherever the case may be, we're then passing that data along to the Global Security Operations Center. And if you're in the UK, it's going to be the center that I'm physically sat in right now, which is the London SOC in Canary Wharf, which is a tier 3 data center, which is where we do all of the data processing activities. So the first layer of processing is applying the standard correlation use cases that we have within the system. And we have a library of about 500 standard vanilla flavored use cases that we know will apply to most organizations' general corporate use cases. Of course, we have to customize, and of course, we have to bring in custom use cases that are focused on business specific needs. But we get customers going very quickly with our out-of-the-box rule sets, which are already fairly well tuned and refined. Once we have that done, we move on to the more of the advanced analytics stage, which is really about passing through user behavior analytics to look at user risk profiling, business service profiling, looking at what the actual business applications are doing, how they're grouped. It could be a HR system, a payment system, or some CRM system. How do the component parts of that interoperate? What are the backup users that use that system? What does it communicate with out externally? What are the running processes on that system? And then grouping that as a system to be able to talk about the risk associated with it as well. And then obviously applying machine learning on top of that to actually profile things over time. So that's quite advanced level of analytics, but all customers get that. And that allows us to find what we call as more of the gray things, not the explicit bad things that you might see from a simple malware event or a firewall IPS event, but the things that are neither black or white, the gray areas, the anomalies, the outliers, the risky user behavior or system behavior that actually is how we're going to find the advanced and persistent threats. Once we've got those three things done, we're going to generate alerts. Those alerts need to be attended by people and supported with orchestration and enrichment tooling. So we've got a team of about 200. You can see a number of them working behind DIA right now and here in the SOC in London and Dubai that are continuously reviewing those alerts as they come in, addressing them in real time to qualify, are they real? How are we going to attend to them? What's the next course of action? And we will use automation tools to add automatic enrichment so that if I've got a malware that's coming in, we understand from the attributes of that malware, what is the associated IPs and hashes and URLs and everything else that that's bundled up with that to understand some context around that, and we can do that on the fly. So we'll take care of all of that alert management and allow our customers to sort of sleep peacefully, knowing that we've got our eyes on the glass and telling them what the risks are. But that's only one part of the service. The next part of it is really about adding more richness to that. And the first part of it is about reporting. Now, this is a very important part of any managed detection response service. It's about throwing a visibility on what the issues are within the environment. We use big data analytics to be able to carve all of that data and visualize it back in a data-driven document type of format where we can have a conversation around what are the problems, what are the risks, where can we improve certain things? Is there user behavior that we're not quite happy with? And we do that on a weekly basis with our customers, where we sit with them for 1 hour. We insist on 1 hour's time, where we can knowledge transfer all of these problems back and visualize where the areas of concern are. And that's incredibly powerful. Lots of issues will come out of that need to be addressed. And we would much rather use that sort of approach to take a proactive approach to incident management rather than a reactive approach where we're chasing alarms. Of course, you have to do both. The next part is our Security HQ incident management platform. And this is really about us being able to share incident data with you, coordinate with you, show SLA KPIs, transfer documentation backwards and forwards in a very secure manner, and again, visualize incident data, not just event data. So what are the commonly occurring themes in terms of the incidents? Who are the users that are continuously causing you problems, having malware issues or phishing issues or bad browsing type of habits? Are we seeing trends in incident data? and we give access to the security incident response platform, Security HQ, to be able to show that back to you, and also give you a gateway into the actual SIM tools. So you'll have access to the same level of technology that we do to be able to do that work. Next, around threat containment is an important piece, because there is no point in being able to detect an advanced and persistent threat or something that's sophisticated if you cannot respond to it, or even simple things. So we lend our services to our customers to be able to orchestrate containment actions, and that could be isolating an endpoint, blocking an IP on a firewall or a URL, even to the extent of being able to suspend a user account on the Active Directory. And that stuff is really important when you're stuck in a meeting, or it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you're not able to respond to those things. The first slide talks about 280 days identification to detection as a trend in the industry. We want to be able to detect things in seconds and minutes and respond to them almost immediately, using process, people, and also orchestration and automation tooling. And that's really what an enterprise-grade threat containment approach would stand for. The last piece in the puzzle on this slide is around the compliance piece, and that breaks down into showing policy compliance with your technical controls for things like ISO 27001 or NIST or CIS standards. That's very important to show that back, because we have the data. The logs tell the story of the access violations and everything else, but also the log management part of it. So we keep as a standard 1 year for all of our customers. And that is often referred to. So if we have an incident today, we may go back in time and have a look at the first occurrence of that particular user activity or process or file activity from 6 months ago or even a year ago. So it's important to have that log management in place. And we have it here in London, very scalable, secure log management as part of our IBM QRadar infrastructure. So we're going to go straight into the theme of the subject, which is really about noise from the field. I want to leverage a lot, the Pune SOC here to give us some feeling on real world situations. And we're going to talk about misconfigurations and errors being a source of data breaches, and some real-time case studies on that. So let's move along. So Dio, take us through this first case study, which is focusing on the importance of patching, which is obviously talked about a lot, but let's show in a real world scenario how that can go badly wrong if you're not on top of that.
Definitely. So we keep talking about importance of patching, but the real world example of how bad it can go is something which we had experienced recently. And in one of this example, where we have seen is that we just released the normal advisory for a critical CV, which was in the OVA Exchange servers, and something which we released on 6th of March. And in ours, we could see that the same vulnerability was the same CV was being targeted, and the attackers had actually got through. They got control of the Exchange servers, and that's where everything was fallen apart. And that was the start of the major attack and major breach which we saw coming through. Later on, after the attackers, they actually got into the Exchange server. It was an easy one for them. The next move there was just to move laterally. They targeted the Link servers, they targeted some Microsoft servers, and then they just started to spread in laterally in the network. And then later on, they tried to do some. That was a point when they actually tried to get in some malicious files, try to get some malicious files so that they can plant into the network, and then they tried to do some remote interactive logons onto the DC servers, and that's where we caught them. So that's where we actually caught doing some unusual stuff. That is from one of the Microsoft servers, Link servers, there was an RDP attempt to the unsuccessful RDP attempt on the domain controllers, and that's where the team caught them. That's when we raise an alert, and so that's how typically this attacker got through with the use of one CV.
So it was a behavioural anomaly rule that picked up on this, which was abnormal location for a log onto a domain controller. But because the exploit was against, it was a 0-day exploit against a very new vulnerability, none of the antivirus is going to pick it up. you have to get lucky somewhere. If they weren't monitoring this, if the customer didn't have any eyes in the glass, then it would have been complete compromise of the Active Directory, and it's game over at that stage. So that's an interesting case study. Okay, so case study number 2 I remember well, was related to a parallel system which was used for remote access and an unintended published service which was then exploited relatively rapidly. Dio, you remember this? Talk us through what happened here.
Surely. So this one is a very classic example where we had an issue of misconfiguration lead to a successful breach later on. And it all started with provisioning of a good service in the sense of vendor management. So the client had brought in a new vendor management system, that is the Parallels firewall or Parallels remote infrastructure management systems. And the whole idea was to get these vendors out into the network, inside the network using this Parallels infrastructure. And all was well thought through. And the only thing which the client basically missed is the missed configuring or hardening this Parallels firewall, and that basically allowed remote RDP tunneling inside. So over the same unsuspecting port 80 or the web shell. So that's where the attacker actually tried to do some brute force. They were successful in getting in there. They basically tried some generic usernames like the IIS one, and that's where they got through. So the client had failed to disable the IIS generic username, and the attackers got through it. And then later on, the attackers tried to plant in some malicious files. That's when the SOC caught them. We even caught them while trying to do some lateral movement using that same generic username IS, which was a behavioral catch which team caught. And that was a successful, then they were later on able to successful and correlate that to the misconfiguration which led it to the breach here.
In the customer's haste to get this service stood up, he didn't realize that he's publishing this service. It hadn't been hardened, and it doesn't take long for that service to be discovered. Simple, relatively generic exploits leveraged against those which were successful in this case. So that's an interesting example. I wonder how often that sort of thing happens, and if you're not monitoring it, it just goes on for years with backdoors into your environment with unhardened systems. So the next case study, again sticking with the theme on errors, was related to a banking and finance organization where we saw legacy leftovers related to Andromeda malware, which is an infrastructure that has purportedly been taken down for some time now, which we saw activity related to, which highlighted systemic problems in the way that they were resolving their DNS. So, Dio, why don't you take us through what we observed and what we did and how we responded here?
Definitely. So I'll quickly give you an introduction about Andromeda. So it's almost a decade ago, this malware or this Trojan had haunted almost half of the world. So half of the systems in the world were infected by this. And I was very surprised to see that still systems are showing remains of this Andromeda Trojan, and systems are still trying to call out this the C2 network back there, which was set up almost a decade ago and brought down basically. So, but still we could see that, and that was evident using some of the DNS queries which the infection was trying to make, and these queries were recorded as the known C2 queries which were happening back there, and that's how team actually detected this using the firewall, wherein we could see that some suspicious DNS queries being made outside.
Yeah, I think what's also interesting here, Dio, aside from the DNS errors and misconfigurations that I think probably a huge percentage of customers have, uncontrolled DNS communications, not centralized, not properly forwarded to a proper resolver. But the interesting thing here with this particular malware is that when you have a major malware incident, there will be artifacts that are left behind. There'll be files that are left behind always. You cannot rely on the antivirus just to say, yeah, we've cleaned that, we've blocked that, there's no longer a threat. Because most of the time, if it's a sophisticated malware, there will be components of that that get dropped, DLL files, .bash files, all over your environment. So having an eye on that, making sure those things get properly cleaned up, is an equal takeaway here to the errors that we often see with how our customers configure the DNS.
Definitely. So the point here, one more point here, important point here is that most of the organizations, they fail to implement and restrict the basic network traffic flows when it comes to web proxies, when it comes to DNS, and when it comes to NTP. And these three protocols are the most leveraged ones. These three tunneled ones, wherein the attackers use them to go out, talk with the C2 servers, exfiltrate data, and do all sort of things with this noisy protocols.
Okay, so you got a bunch of interesting use cases here, Dio, that talk about how we can detect those things based on DNS packet inspection or firewall traffic. Why don't you take us through a few of those?
Definitely. So few of the interesting use cases which we have been developing since the real world experiences are about excessive denies to IP or the proxies. Then there are some base encoded URLs which we have seen, which most of the Trojans use. There have been some what do you say, noisy, what I would say, category blocks on the proxies, wherein any uncategorized websites are being either blocked or allowed in an excessive amount. And the one which is the most useful one here, I would say, is any communication which is out there to the known C2s or the malware domains.
So I guess one of the challenges with dealing with DNS traffic is its high volume, and a lot of it may look abnormal. So the way that you need to deal with that is by using enrichment techniques that are automated to be able to make decisions about whether that's good or bad traffic. So the way that we do it, we take some of those use cases that we just talked about as an initial alerting mechanism, and then noisy alerts. You can't possibly handle those with end-to-end human analysis. What we do is we take those alerts in, we extract out the attributes of the actual log message itself. So then we start with a basic lookup. You know, where is that domain resolving to? Where is it registered? Where is it hosted? And look for any particular mismatches. Then we pass that through onto the next stage, which is really about the threat intelligence. So do we have a reputation on that? Is there a low time to live? Is that mismatch in terms of something which is registered in Panama but hosted out of the Netherlands? That's a kind of suspicious thing. We take all those suspicious indicators and we rank them. And then if we see multiples of them, as in, you know, I've got a low time to live, I've got a mismatch in registered, I've got a low reputation IP that is trying to resolve to, then that's something I just want to be able to block. I know it's bad. I need to put in place a process to get that contained immediately. Add that IP to the firewall block list and just kill it. We don't want to see any communication to that IP. But it's not always as black and white as that. You might just have something which has got a low time to live. Everything else is clean, everything else is good. You need to put that through more of a human analyst approach to actually identify what it's trying to resolve. You know, what's the sort of volume of it? Where is it coming from? What system is making the initial request? And then make a decision about whether that needs to be a legitimate traffic or blocked. The point is, it requires both orchestration of process and people and automation in terms of enrichment and blocking stuff. You need to be able to do this stuff very quickly on the fly, because DNS traffic as a covert channel talking out to C2 domains, that stuff happens in seconds and minutes. So unless you can detect it in real time and respond to it in seconds and minutes, then you're not able to really address that particular problem. And this is the approach that we take. Okay, so at the moment we're offering a 30-day proof of value or proof of concept where we can take the customer through a complete experience of what a security operations center service is, what the MDR service is, from onboarding to operations, and allowing that operations to continue for a month, so you can see a full monthly cycle in terms of the weekly reporting, the real-time analytics, the incident handling, the dashboarding, the granular reporting as a complete experience. So we're offering it at the moment. We've had a good uptake on that, and it gives customers an opportunity to see what this is all about. You know, it's not a technology; it's a complete service proposition that gives you know, the ability to have the end-to-end visibility, real-time detection, and people on hand to respond to problems on the fly as they happen. So I think we see a lot of customers reporting a lot of value from that. And you know, inquire with the Bytes team if you want to take that up. You're welcome.